Okay, welcome to the CORA online video conference series. This is the second session we've got in the first Coaches Corner we've got. My name is Ron Chin. I'm with Falls Creek Racing Canoe Club, and I'm also CORA President and Chair. Facilitating and crucial to the organization of these events are a few other CORA directors, Leanne Stanley, from Kelowna Paddle Center, Eric Ages from Fairway Gorge Paddling Club, and Val Simmons from Haunani Paddling Club in Montreal. Okay, so we've got a few housekeeping items at first. First of all, we're recording the session this time. We forgot the last time, and we'll be posting it on the internet. So by remaining on the call, you are thereby consenting to the use and display of your name and your image, as the case may be, depending on how you're participating on the call, and as well as the posting as well of any comments or contributions you have, and you will not receive any compensation for posting on the internet, okay? The other housekeeping items, for those participants on the call, we'd like to ask you to mute your sound so that background noise is minimized. And we'd like to ask you to participate by asking questions through the chat function. So if you scroll down to the bottom of the screen, you'll see a little bubble in chat there, and you can type in your questions. Or alternately, you can also raise your hand by hitting the raise hand button also at the bottom of your screen for that part of the session where we're asking for comments from the participants, okay? We've got Eric and Val who will be monitoring the chat room and making a note of any comments, and then they'll be presented to the speakers during the course of the session. So today's session is off-season training and training during COVID restrictions, and we've got Leanne Stanley and Sherry Hunt. Sherry Hunt's a strength and conditioning coach. She coaches for Fort Langley Canoe Club, and she's also a member at Falls Creek. So I'll hand it off to Leanne to do the introductions of herself and Sherry and take it from there. You're muted, Leanne.
Did you catch that profanity while I was muted? Anyone read lips?
No, we saw this.
All right. Thanks so much, Ron. And thank you everybody for joining us on here today. This is something that I've wanted to do for a while in terms of bringing as many paddlers together as we can from as many different places as we can to talk paddling, because those that know me know that once I start talking paddling, it's hard to get me to shut up. So I hope you're ready to hear my voice, but to give you a different point of view and instead of, save you from hearing me all the time, Sherry Hunt has joined us today. As Ron said, Sherry's from Vancouver. She has her own strength and conditioning business. She's got, oh my gosh, Bachelor of Science, Master of Science in Kinesiology. She's a certified strength and conditioning specialist. She's a functional movement systems level 2 with an advanced certificate in that. She's a learning facilitator for Coaching Association of Canada. Like, this girl is amazing. So I'm super stoked that she agreed to join us today, so that you just didn't have to listen to me the whole time. So Sherry, before I introduce, I guess I should introduce myself. Hi, I'm Leanne. Most people on here know me, but in case you don't, I'm a paddler from Kelowna, but I originally came from Ontario. So I see a lot of my Ontario friends on here as well. So thanks for joining in. I started out in marathon canoeing. I dabbled in some dragon boats at the community and national level, racing at the Worlds. I've dabbled in SUP, I've dabbled in surf ski, but outrigger is my love. And so I've been paddling for 22 years, I think we're up to now, something like that. And I've been through a few different phases of my life where injuries have caused me to focus more on coaching. And I've realized that coaching is definitely one of the things that I love to do. So along from my paddling career where I've raced internationally for Team Canada, as well as with some lovely Canadian girls at non-world races. I've had some pretty awesome success as an individual, racing in Southern California, racing over in Hawaii, top 10 finish at Tiaito and Tahiti. And yeah, I love to paddle and I love to talk about paddling. So that's why I'm here. I'm a Puakia coach. I'm also, just full disclosure, I'm a team rider for Hannah Howe Paddle Sports, Puakia Designs, Quick Blade Paddles, and Vycobi. So those are my internal biases, just so everybody's clear on that. But today we're here to talk about off-season training. And like I said, we have Sherry Hunt joining us. And Sherry, how about you tell us a little bit about your paddling background? And I know you do some great work with some Dragon Boat breast cancer teams as well as outrigger. So fill us in a little bit.
Sure. I started paddling when I was 14 with sprint kayaking, and I did that for many years. When my daughter was born, when I was 20, I decided to move into dragon boating instead because the training was less intensive. And I've also done rowing, and then from dragon boating, I went to outrigger canoeing, and I have a surf ski as well, but it's in the repair shop because I hit a stump not too long ago. So kind of enjoying a lot of those, and I've also coached all of those disciplines except for surf ski. And I coach Spirit of Breast out in Chilliwack, and also I coach outrigger now as well. And my specialties for strength and conditioning are really any tailored sort of strength and conditioning. So I have a Paralympian who's one of my main clients, for example. And I also really love to work with paddlers who have had a breast cancer diagnosis, because my master's degree was about breast cancer and exercise, and also paddlers. So here we are.
Fantastic. And you have a website, sherrystrength.ca, and we'll put some of these links up in the chat for people who are in the Facebook discussion down the road, so that if you want to come back and check out different things or different people that we may talk about today for different resources, you can access those. I was hoping to have a list that I could copy and paste, but I ran out of time this afternoon. Right. Anyway, so yeah, sherrystrength.ca if you want to learn more about Sherry and some of the stuff that she offers. But yeah, we had a lot of people submitting questions, so thank you so much. There's a few people that put them in on the Facebook discussion page, but there were a lot of texts and Facebook messages and emails that I got, and some of them are on the topic we're going to cover today in terms of off-season and COVID season training. And then some of them require either personal conversations or stuff hopefully we'll cover in another coach's session like this today. One of the major questions that I've been getting is about technique. We'll cover that another time, kind of thing. And we'll get some guest speakers in to join us on that. So without further ado, let's start with the questions that were submitted ahead of time, and then we'll roll through some of those. And if you have something that you want to further expand upon, then put that in the chat if you can, please. And Val will jump in on us to ask your question. And then if you have another question pops up out of your head, put it in the chat, and then Val will bring us around to those at the end, kind of thing. And that's where if you want to speak and ask your questions, you can raise your hand at that point in time. But for now, we're just going to bounce off the submitted questions and go from there. All right, Eric, that's your cue.
So Val, I'm going to ask you to start with questions related to the water, so the water side training, and those were submitted in advance before the meeting. So if you can draw off of those and we'll get going.
Sorry about that. Okay. So what is your go-to exercise for off the water training? The exercise you never ever skip?
Ooh, fun.
Do you want to go again?
What's that?
Do you want to go first?
Sure, I will. For me, I have Comedy to blame for this one. Because when I first started trying out for the national dragon boat team back in 2000 and I don't know, 5 or 4 or something like that. I couldn't do a pull-up to save my life. And so when I started to come out west, and it was, you know, trying out for the teams for 2011 for Tampa, Comedy was like, it's all about technique and coordination. You got to figure this out. And so for me, ever since, pull-ups have been kind of that exercise to help build coordination, help that you have to think about technique doing, that you have to have a body awareness for, you have to have body control for. And it's a great exercise to identify weaknesses that you can use other exercises to address. So for me, my go-to is pull-ups. And there's lots of ways. I wasn't able to do one to start off. So there's lots of ways to progress up to a full pull-up if you don't have the strength to initially do one off the bat. You can use bands, you can climb up and do negatives, you can do static holds. There's lots of options, which are going to are more in Sherry's on that side of my screen. So if I point that way, I'm doing that because that's more in Sherry's area in terms of the progressions and the regressions would be something she's better at talking about, but I am. But for me, my go-to off water is pull-ups.
Okay, cool. And yeah, I love pull-ups, and I agree that they're not for everyone due to some shoulder issues and things like that. So I personally don't have a go-to exercise because I look back whenever I'm thinking of strength and conditioning, I look back at training principles, and variability or variation is one of the training principles. And it's so important to have a variety of exercises that you're doing in your periodized program that you're doing. So I would never, do one exercise for every program and always do that one exercise. Even my favorite exercise is one arm pulls. I would definitely take a break from those and not have them in every program purposefully. So yeah, full body, like muscle balance is so important, and having a full body workout is important for paddlers as well. So although, yeah, those back exercises like pull-ups and one arm pulls and are great. It's nice to have variation. On that note, I also will add in the hip hinge or Romanian deadlift exercise, some people call it. Some people talk about Romanian deadlift as a straight leg deadlift, which I disagree. It's more of a soft knee deadlift. So that incorporates a hip hinge, and it's very important for people to learn how to do the hinge motion for those techniques that have it with proper posture, hinging from the hip rather than bending the spine. So the hip hinge would be one that's important for movement ability.
Fantastic. Okay.
Awesome. I'm going to jump in here for a second.
Oh, please do. Sure.
Just a comment that came to me in the chat directly, kind of thing, saying that we don't move in a pull-up direction, so why train that? And that's a great point. The reason I like it is for the coordination and the technique aspect and the body control, because those are all things that are translated onto the water. Thanks, Derek. I figured it was you, not your son, who said this. I like it because it's not just about the movement for me. It's the body control, the technique, all these things that we have to pay attention to on the water as well. So though it's not movement specific, paddling specific, it has components that compare to on the water. So I completely agree. Bench row, Derek Schroeder from Ontario has brought up. He's a fantastic coach and paddler back in Ontario with Paddle Sport Performance. Bench row is another great exercise where we're actually moving in the plane of movement that we are with paddling. So that's another great one that, again, as Sherry said, it has to do with the individual, where our strengths or weaknesses, and what are we trying to work on with our program. So I have my go-to that I love. It's also because I hate it. But if we ask for one, then that would be my one. But I like Sherry's thing about everything's personal. And we're going to talk about that so many times today, that so many things are going to have to be about a periodized program that's built around the individual.
And pull-ups use a lot of pull-ups. You're one angle of using the lats. Well, it's primarily a lat exercise. You'd also want to fit in straight arm,
Pull
like
downs.
shoulder extension and pullovers, and have a variety, because that exercise, the purpose of it is to target the lats. It's not necessarily the like the angle that we're doing. It's to strengthen the lats. And so having a number of different angles that you're doing that is great to get the whole movement of that the lats do, because you can't there's not really one exercise that gets the entire movement of the lats.
Yeah, awesome. All right, one down, 25 to go.
Okay. So also, what exercise do you hate or dislike, but do because the benefits outweigh the discomfort?
So I'm guessing we're talking about us as athletes from this point of view. I didn't ask for clarification on this question, but Sherry, what's the one that you dislike the most for you personally as an athlete?
Well, I'm a heavy person, so some of the body weight exercises are more intimidating to me, especially if I compare myself to my peers. But I don't have any exercises that I hate. If I don't like it, I think about why. So push-ups, it's because push-ups. It's because it can be challenging for me because I'm heavy and I have a previous shoulder injury. So I'm not going to do full push-up if it's hurting my shoulder and I can't do the number of repetitions is my goal for the type of strength I'm trying to improve at that time. So I would modify it. So yeah, I used to not like push-ups when my coach told me to do them for a minute, full push-ups, and it wasn't really realistic for me. But now that I am an adult and I'm more educated, then I just modify the push-ups and make them suit my workout, and they're fine. So it's just all about knowing how to modify for your own body.
Exactly, and that's one of the benefits of working with a coach, whether you're working with them remotely or in person, and so that they can see and talk to you about previous injuries or issues that you have and be able to modify different exercises for you. Finding a workout on the internet and trying to do it doesn't turn out well. It's a good starting point, but having that individual touch definitely helps. And I know there's one person downstairs that I've modified a lot of stuff for, and I see there's another face online where we're working on a program for this person as well that is personally tailored to their individual needs and abilities, kind of thing, as we grow. What do I hate? Again, I'm a big person as well, so a lot of those body weight things I hate. Pull-ups was one that I hated, and so it was like, okay, why do I hate it? Exactly as you said. But for me, again, it's thinking, why do I hate these things? So rear foot elevated split squats or lunges. I hate these because I had this conceived notion in my head that those would make my legs bigger, and I didn't want to add weight to my boat. So I'd rather have skinny, tiny little legs. Whereas I've gotten past that, but I'm still not used to a leg burn. I'm upper body burn, no problem. Leg burn, doesn't get along with me. And then those renegade rows where you're in a plank with dumbbells in your hands and you're doing the rows, hate those. Can't stand them. But I like to say what you hate the most is likely what you need to do the most, because there's a reason that you hate it. So it's really about
though, right? If you hate it because you're injured and it's hurting your joints, doesn't mean that means you need to do it more, right?
Exactly. I'm talking injury free, where it's just, I'm just going to bitch and complain about it because it hurts in the good way, the good hurt, not the bad hurt. And that's another thing, is that in all kinds of training, not just off season, off water, on water, whatever, it's like there's good hurt, there's bad hurt. Good hurt is I'm working hard. It's part of the program. I'm supposed to be, out of breath right now, or I'm supposed to feel a little bit of burn in my muscles, that lactic acid. And then there's bad hurt of going, this doesn't feel right. Something pinches, something pulls. That is you stop. That's not stuff you push through. That's stuff you go get checked out right away. So bad hurt, nuh-uh. Anyway. As you, those of you that know me, I tend to ramble and get on tangents. So that's why I've got Ron, Val, and Eric and Sherry to try to bring me back from here if I don't bring myself back. So.
Okay, so I'm bringing you back. What is the one exercise all paddlers should be doing other than stretching, but aren't doing?
Ooh. You want to head this on first?
Well, this brings to mind not a particular exercise, but a particular way of training. I think that sometimes athletes aren't training in the gym consistently. They'll just think, oh, I have to get strong for this fitness test that's coming up. I better go to the gym and get ready for that, and just train for that thing, rather than doing a whole body, like, smart training program that's periodized and changing every 6 to 8 weeks, right? So I would say that, you know, that's more what more people should be doing rather than just sticking with one program all the time. Because if you have a well-rounded program, you're going to hit all those things that you need to, that you might not be getting with the program you just do all the time, you know, chin-ups, dips, bench press, bench pull, sit-ups. That doesn't cover preventing shoulder injuries and how to move properly. So it's important to have a well-rounded program.
Yeah. And I'm going to add to this, along with a well-rounded program, one of the things that I think is neglected by a lot of paddlers is mobility and recovery. So those two things I see neglected quite a bit. So by mobility, I'm talking about moving the joints actively through a range of motion with little to no resistance. And this goes hand in hand with stretching, but it's active, whereas static stretching is passive, meaning you're not moving. So there's lots of people where if you get them, you know, laying on their side and then opening up their chest, and it's like their shoulders up to the sky, they don't have that thoracic rotation to be able to come closer to the floor. It's like, okay, from a coach's perspective and a strength and conditioning coach's perspective, we're looking at, okay, where is this limitation in movement coming from? Is it a flexibility issue? Is it an injury issue? Is it a mobility issue? Is it a weakness issue? We need to see those kind of things. So then that's where we build a program off of. But mobility through all your joints, a lot of people I see, hip flexors, thoracic rotation, like shoulder mobility. Can you put your arms above your head? Because I can't. I know that's one of the things that I know is one of my limitations. And so it's part of my daily program is going through mobility. And if you've ever had to go for physio for something, most of the exercises they have you do, or at least for my physio, are mobility. Because that limited mobility is going to start restricting your movement in the boat, restricting your movement in the gym, and ultimately can result in injuries.
A good and simple one for that is if you're against a wall. I don't have a wall nearby, but I can show you just proper posture. I don't have a paddle nearby either, but I have a broomstick. So proper posture, you would have a paddle that you'd be able to have against your head and your upper back and your hips. And so keep that in mind when you're doing a number of different exercises. One would be the hip hinge, in which when you're doing that, you're also working on hamstring mobility. So that's a great one for hamstring mobility and hamstring strengthening. And also keeping that posture I was just mentioning, if you're against a wall, doing these angel wing exercises where you're really pushing back the elbows and forearms and hands, and then raising and lowering the arms. It looks easy, but a lot of us tend to do this and arch the back while we're trying to do it to compensate, but keeping the rib cage down is more challenging than it looks. And some of us, if we keep the rib cage down, we actually can't get the arms opened into that external rotation. So that's another good one if you're kind of looking for some examples for exercises to get into.
Adding that wall slides one to the one I hate. It's definitely on my list because you're here and it's like so many people, like you said, want to flare the ribs, arch the back, but also take away their neck kind of thing and go up to here where it's like really focusing on trying to keep those shoulders down and give yourself a neck. Oh my gosh, it is uncomfortable. A good regression from that is doing it while laying on the floor as well before you move up to the wall.
Yeah, maybe even with pillows under your hands.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, as far as what's one exercise all paddlers should be doing that they aren't, mobility is definitely high on my list. And then the recovery is the other piece of that, of making sure that you're not going too hard too often. And we're probably going to talk about this shortly. You're not going too hard too often, that you're, eating and not eating junk kind of thing. And that's a whole nother talk on nutrition in itself, but that you're sleeping at night, you're doing your best to reduce stress, you're not consuming too many substances, whether that be alcohol or other. Like there's so much that you can do in terms of recovery to help you on the water as well. So not just an exercise, but mobility, recovery. And sorry, Sherry, I forgot what you said. I blame my concussion.
Oh, it's okay. I just said not having one
Yeah,
exercise that
there
you're
we go.
always doing. Just having a wide range of exercises, then you'll cover all your bases and you won't really have to worry about that one exercise.
Awesome.
Okay, so here's another very specific one. Again, another what's the best exercise one? What single exercise do you think most improved your success as a sprinter?
Sherry, did you do any of the world sprints or sprinting stuff? I know you've done dragon boat, so that's
Oh,
definitely
and
sprinting.
I've also done sprint kayaking for many, many years.
There you
So
go.
yeah, through that we learned a lot about, well, one of my strengths, maybe not now, but has been in the past doing bench pull or one arm rows with muscle endurance. So I would never do this like, well, after Commonie's talked recently, I may periodize it in different parts of my year, but right now I only do it in the springtime. Having those like long, like 2 minutes of doing bench pull and just feeling that intense burn and discomfort, because a 500-meter race is you need muscle endurance for that. You're uncomfortable for the whole time, right? Because you're pulling as much force as you can for every stroke, and that's like doing that's like doing, I don't know how many strokes that would be, but 2 minutes of bench pull basically. So I wouldn't do that all the time, but there is a time and place, and I found that that's been a helpful tool.
And I think that comes back to, like you talked about periodizing in your program of different things at different times. And I think that's a key, is that periodization. So for me, when I'm training for sprints, in the strength portion of my program, it matches up with the water part of my program. Whereas like there's a time in that program where I do conversion to power. So I've taken the time to build the foundation of that strength in my aerobic base, and then building on that and doing lactic tolerance and speed work, that kind of thing, and then doing the conversion to power. So all these different things are different phases in a program, or at least the program that I follow and ones that I've developed for other people. So I think that has been huge. So it's not, again, not a single exercise, but again, that periodization of a program and just the encompassing of everything that you're doing from on the water and off the water, to do that as you build up to your taper before you're trying to peak for whatever. Yeah, but technique more than anything. Like this is going on with having, like, being on the water, is technique is huge. So it all comes back to, again, when you're on the water, when you're working on off-season stuff, having a coach is priceless kind of thing. And I know there's some of us, like, I don't personally have a coach here in Kelowna that I can work with, but I rely on other people. So when I go travel, getting feedback from them. And we're going to give a list of some different groups that offer these coaching services here in a little bit as well.
Okay, great. All right, for this next one, it's a transition from dragon boating to newbie OC paddler. So from dragon boating to newbie OC paddler, what are the key things I should be modifying or shifting focus? So we might want to be thinking if you're talking paddling technique or training or nutrition. And if you wouldn't mind applying this to the COVID situation. And I'm going to, in other words, how do you focus on this during COVID when you're trying to transition from one sport to the other? And I'd like you to consider the Eastern paddlers in this one who don't have access to water, or at least Montreal doesn't, Toronto does, apparently. So if you can consider that in your answer as well.
So we're not going to talk about the technique side of things in terms of dragon boat technique versus OC technique. We'll save that for our technique talk. But in terms of training, so Sherry, you've done training for dragon boat teams, outrigger teams. What do you see as kind of, is there a difference in terms of what they should be doing in this off season or as they get out in their boat?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. Something that comes to mind is when you're in the dragon boat, you have a lot of people moving the boat together. So you don't really get that feeling for how to move the boat on your own. So when you get into OC1 and even OC6, you get a better feeling for that. But sometimes that means that you're pulling more, you have to pull your own weight, and you know that you are. you're more aware of that in the smaller boats. So being familiar with how to move a boat is helpful. And of course, taking it back to the gym, I would take that back to the gym and just make sure you are doing that general foundational strength training and doing maybe a little extra shoulder stability exercises. So working on your external rotators and so the rotator cuff, or a little extra core work. So you can, when you are pulling, so when you're paddling or doing anything that requires power, we need to stabilize the spine first, then the limbs move. So make sure that your core is strong so that you can stabilize your spine and be ready for that power that's going to develop, that might be more than you need to do in a dragon boat if you have a lot of people helping you. So yeah, strengthen your core and then work out from there. If you are going to just prioritize some exercises over others, yeah, I would say, yeah, prioritize the core and also do some shoulder strengthening, like external rotator cuff sorts of things.
I'm on exactly the same facet as that. In terms of, like, in the dragon boat, it's easy to hide. You don't necessarily have the same amount of load on your paddle that you can possibly get in OC. So again, I completely agree with, focus on the core, because body control when you're in the OC1, if you're so used, like in dragon boat, if the technique in your boat was to be really outside, then it's like, okay, well, you're going to be burying your ama. And if you're a right-sided paddler and you're an OC1 now and you're used to being really outside, we've got to have that body control and that body awareness. So building that core and getting used to being on unstable surfaces with that core as well, so that you build that body awareness, I think is the best thing that you can do until you get on the water and get a coach for outrigger technique to help work with you on the technique once you get on the water. But yeah, off the water, I totally agree. Focus on that core and that stability.
Great. Okay. The next question is, how do you stay motivated once back on the water instead of just going out for a paddle? And I'm just going to mention something that was brought up in the chat. Not sure if it's a question to everybody or specifically to you guys, but it's somewhat related. Has COVID made it hard to focus on one type of paddling, like sprinting or long distance training? So motivation and focus, comments?
You want me to jump in on this one, Sherry?
Yeah.
All right.
Close my window.
So there's a couple different things, and I think the next couple questions are going to kind of tie into the same thing. But for motivation, it depends on what kind of person are you, and kind of what are you training for. So if you're like a person that likes to compete, some clubs have been doing, individual time trials. We've got the CORA race series right now. That's a virtual race series that Ron's going to talk a little bit kind of when we're wrapping up, where we had a huge turnout in the first race. So that's something where you pick your course and you go. Some clubs have been doing their individual time trials so that you guys can post a time, maybe once a month. But if your club's not doing that, then you can do it on your own. Pick your own goal, set a distance, set a speed, a max speed you want to be able to attain, or a speed that you want to hold. It's a lot of these little challenges things. And you'll see a lot of these last COVID season, so last year, a lot of these popped up in lots of different places all over the internet from all over the world, of different challenges that were kind of posted up. So you can look to those kind of things for motivation. You can get out with other people and make yourself accountable. If you've got a set time this day, depending on COVID protocols, because right now we're limited to how many people you're allowed to go out with. It's a tough one, and ultimately it's going to come down to your internal motivation and also what you're training for and your level of training. It's definitely hard, but this is a time where if you're looking at trying to make advantages over that person you were battling last season, think about them. If you're that competitive type A person, like some of us, if you're putting in the work, and they might not be because they're not motivated, just think what's going to happen when we all get back on that start line.
Yeah, and for me, I'm less motivated by races. I'm more motivated by how things feel. And so I like the feeling of feeling fast, more of a sprint kayak way of word that's, I don't know if it's used as much in outrigger, but feeling fast. Who doesn't like to feel fast? I was thinking about that today when I was at Comedi's workshop and she was talking about speed work. And I was thinking, I love the way that feels. It feels so good to have a fast start, doesn't it? And so that's a really great motivator for me to just remember how it feels. And so also another thing is having a training buddy or a training group is really nice. So there's someone on the call here who I like to go out paddling with. Okay, Cheryl, she's been coming out here to my neighborhood and helping me a lot. Just get out on the water and enjoy paddling, because we have different things that motivate different people. Some people are motivated to like be the perform the best, but sometimes it's nice just to get out there and paddle too, right? So if you can have some training sessions where you're actually just really enjoying it and not worrying about what your GPS says, then that for me is a motivator as well. Oh, and also I'll do a little plug for myself here too. My strength and conditioning online classes have been great to motivate myself and others to have a consistent schedule with strength and conditioning. So we do strength training together, and just knowing that people are expecting you is helpful for getting motivated to do something.
Yeah, that accountability piece, absolutely. And I don't know if my training partner's on the call today or not, but yeah, it's a big thing having that piece for knowing that you've got that routine going. I love what you said about feeling better and remembering feelings from the past. So like, yeah, how does it feel to have that fast boat? Like, think about if you've heard of the flow state, if you've seen the new Disney movie Soul, where they talk about the flow state, whether you've done that, had that feeling in sport, or you've had that feeling in music, or you've had that feeling in your work. It's when things just seem to roll without effort. Things are going, you don't have to think. It's just that momentum's in your favor. And it's that flow state is kind of what I aspire to when I get into racing out there, is to find that flow state. So I know in order to do that, I need to be a certain level of fitness. I have to have a certain level of strength, those kind of things. And there's so many ideas that are swimming through my head that I can't coordinate at the moment, but yeah.
And that feeling of being in an OC6 with everyone moving their hips together and catching and anchoring the blade together at the same time. I was really missing that feeling today. Or being in a dragon boat and hearing the whooshing sound all happening at the same time with 20 paddlers at the same time. So yeah, those are things that you need to have coordination and strength and fitness to do. And so that's a way to motivate myself.
Yeah, those days when we can get back in an OC6 here in British Columbia, at least, like it's been almost a year since I've been in an OC6. And like you said, when everybody's moving together, all those bodies are moving together, everybody's catching at the same, the force is being applied the same. It is a gorgeous feeling when you know that you're giving your all and the rest of the people in that boat are giving their all for you as well. It's those kind of memories that take me through some of those cold or ugly days, or those days where I'm tired, and not the concussion related tired, the regular normal person tired. Yeah, that's a great one. Yeah, those memories, or those races, or those activities where things just fell to shit. Excuse my language, but those times when you're like, I didn't prepare for that, or I wasn't ready. Like, those are things. Some of my worst races are the things I've learned the most from, and then have built into my trainings, because I never want to be in that situation again, kind of thing. So learning from those crappy times and then hoping to relive those amazing times can help with motivation too.
Okay, fantastic. Thanks for that. So this is related, but I think you might have another swing on it, is how do I train? And this is something we're all living right now. How do I train when there's nothing specific to train for?
I think I just covered what I would say for that, just the way it feels, just looking forward to that feeling.
I've got notes for this one. I had to, for those that don't know, I'm suffering from post-concussion syndrome. So it's been over 19 months since I had a car accident where I suffered whiplash and a concussion. And I'm one of those lucky 10% of people with concussion where the symptoms carry on, kind of thing. So I have a hard time organizing my thoughts and my words. So some of these things I have to prepare for. So that's why we asked you guys to submit questions ahead of time too. So I didn't have to think on my feet as much. But so to the question of how do I train when there's nothing to train for? Ultimately, my recommendation is you have to ask yourself, what is your goal? And ultimately what goes along with what is your goal is how much time do you have available to put towards that goal in terms of training time, whether that be on the water, off the water, combination. What do you have available to put into that? Because it's not realistic to say, I want to be top 5 at the world sprints, but you can only train maybe 2 or 3 times a week. Unless you've got a massive base of years and years and years of training and paddling under your belt, that goal is not realistic with the time that you have available. So you've got to be realistic with yourself of what do you want. So in these COVID times, are you a person that's going to train, 1 to 3 hours a week, or which I would call more recreational? I'm sorry if I offend anyone with these terms. But if you're kind of like out there for a couple hours, well, your goals have to reflect that. If you're a mid-packer, a weekend warrior, the person that has a day job and a family that has a schedule where, you only have so much time in a day, but you can still manage to find, 5 to 8 hours a week, well, those goals are going to be different than our person that only has 1 or 2 hours a week. But it's also going to be different than the person that's training for performance, that's going for that podium in major races, that, can commit to training 9, 10 plus hours a week. So step 1 for how do I train when there's nothing specific to train for is what's your goal? Because my answer is going to be different based on where you fit in one of those categories or between one of those categories. So if you're a performance person, like I usually am, I'm looking ahead to what's the next major international event. Well, that's right now we're leaning towards world sprints in 2022. It's like, okay, what do I need to do now here in February 2021 to prepare for something that is a year and a half away? So from a performance aspect, I work through long period cycles. You think about Olympians that work through 4-year cycles in terms of their training. They don't do the same training every year. It's all mapped out to build up to that, their qualifiers, but also then to their peak for the Olympics. And Sherry, you've worked with a Paralympian, so you've been through this planning, long-term planning side of things. So if you're a performance person, I'm looking, for me, it's like base is the key for me right now. It's like, I want to have this big foundation, because the wider my base, the higher I can get my peak when I start working through my lactate threshold. I start working through my VO2 max training. I start working through my speed training. I start working through my power training in 2022. But right now, that big base is huge for me. And then for some variety, yeah, I'm going to throw in, when, my concussion protocol allows it, I'm going to throw in some lactate work. I'm going to throw in some speed work just for variety. But my focus for 2021 is base. And that's what it was for 2020, where I just go out and, paddle for fun in this low heart rate, because that was the sandbox I was given by my concussion practitioners was, you got to stay below this heart rate. And it turned out to be the year that I paddled my fastest, because I spent so much time where, as an endurance athlete, the research says you get the most bang for your buck spending, 80% of your time down in these low zones and 20% of your time kind of up in your moderate to high intensity stuff kind of thing. So it's like that foundation is key. Even though I couldn't go above threshold in any of my training, I could still hold a masterful, in my mind, 10 and 15K pace. I thought it was killer and it felt good. And that was the biggest thing. And I'm like, oh, I've been preaching this train low thing, spend a lot of time in your base zones for a long time, but I was actually finally forced to do it. And I'm like, oh, maybe there's something to this research that these scientists have been saying, you know, for a couple decades now, kind of thing. So I think one of the major mistakes that a lot of people make is that they go too hard too often. And so they're missing that big base of going. There's nothing wrong with going out for a leisurely paddle with your heart rate, you know, you could still talk comfortably, but you're moving, you're getting a bit of sweat on. That's a great place to train. So I've been having fun, you know, looking around, talking to people while I'm out on the water, being able to paddle with others without, you know, putting on a major resistor, because I'm like allowing myself to train at a lower intensity, which has brought huge dividends. So bringing back to the question, how do you train when there's nothing to train for, is we've got to figure out where you are in terms of your goals, what's important for you, and then we can start to work with a coach to develop a program that will give you some variety, help you meet your goals, and be able to maximize that time that you do have to train so that you can get the most bang for your buck. I always talk about train smarter, not harder, kind of thing. So those that know me that I like to be lazy, even before the concussion, but I want to go fast. I want to be strong. So it's about making the most of the time that you have. What's the minimum dose I can get for the maximal output, kind of thing. Sherry, you're nodding your head, and it was like you wanted to jump in too.
Oh yeah, I was just thinking you can always do base training. Just do multiple cycles of base training. Of course, and contribute like variation and all those training principles, but there's always time for base training when there is a distant goal, right? And it's a benefit. It's a huge benefit.
Okay, so here's a question from somebody with a goal. What can I do that will help me be able to smash the guy I battled with every race in 2019 when we are able to get back into racing?
Sorry.
Well, here's a goal.
It is. That's funny. I think like a lot of the stuff we've already talked about today matches up with this. Is that right now, if depending on where you are in the world, competition may be, face-to-face competition may be a reality for you depending on where you are, or it may not be depending on where you are. So for us, looking at really, in honesty, we're not looking at real racing till either, you know, fall of this year for us in BC, or next season, so 2022. So it's like, if that's the case where you are in the world, is play the long game. Like, think about what you're doing right now, and they're sitting on the couch is number one. So that consistency, getting into the gym regularly, having a coach that's giving you a periodized program, and building that foundation, that base. What do you say, Sherry?
I agree. And really to focus on the part of, excuse me, having a periodized program. And if you don't know how to do that, then now might be a really good time to invest in a coach or to invest in your education on that, because there have been workshops out here, like Common, you just put one on about water training, and I put one on not too long ago about strength training. So there are ways to learn how to build periodized strength programs, but if you don't know how, then hire a coach who can help you, because having a periodized program will and if your nemesis doesn't have one, then that would make a difference. Training smart.
Absolutely. Again, back to that training smarter, not harder. And there's lots of resources online. Not all of them are good. Let's put it that way. So when you're investing in your education, there's certain places to go. Like the nickname for it is bro science. Like, you don't want to necessarily kind of those things that you might hear around the gym, but like that's one of the benefits of going to a certified coach, or a coach that, you know, has a lot of experience, or has testimonials that go along with them, is that they know what they are doing, that they've worked with other people to be able to get you that program. And if you don't know what periodization means, it's a term that was coined by Tudor Bompa back in, I can't get it. God knows when. But there's lots of literature out there on periodization. If you're one of those people that like to look into it yourself, if you want to look at structuring, basic structuring and season planning, people like April Zilg and Paddle Ninja have stuff on their social media. You've got Paddle Lab, that's an online service that you can sign up for that goes through that. You've got Paddle Monster, you've got Booth Training, you've got Comedy, you've got Sherry, you've got myself, you've got Train Like a King with Tapuria in New Zealand, you've got Vesna, international paddling coach from New Zealand, who's an amazing woman. I don't know if she made it on today or not. You've got Paddle Life, which is Sean Rice, who's a surf ski paddler. Like, there's so many great paddlers out there that are either paddlers themselves that have gone into coaching or are just coaches. There's so much information out there. If you find a source and you're like, is this really something I should be paying attention to? Feel free to fire me a message. I'm happy to help guide you into going, ooh, careful with that one, or help refer you to other places or websites that talk you through. Larry Kane's former blog he's Canadian Olympic gold medalist, in fact, from the '84 Olympic Games in C1. His old blog is still live, I believe, and he has tons of stuff on structuring training as well. And was a national team paddler as well as a national team coach. So there's lots of resources out there if you want to dig in, that I'm happy to help guide or give or anything like that. So it's, yeah, whether you want to do the education yourself and looking into things yourself, or if you want someone that's already done all the looking into things and the learning for you. And there's time and place for that. So there's things where I go to people for, it's like, I have the knowledge somewhere in my head, but I need someone to just tell me what I need right now based on what I'm doing. So it's never a problem to invest in yourself and your education one way or another, or ask for help.
I was just looking for a definition of periodization, and I found one here: planned variations in training specificity, intensity, and volume organized in cycles within an overall program. I know that's kind of wordy, but really it just means like there are so many things that we need to work on to be the best paddler we can be, and we can't work at them all at once. It's not possible because of some training principles, including interference. So if you really are working on, your aerobic threshold and really working on your anaerobic capacity at the same time, those things are kind of conflicting. So you have to figure out when to do them and maintain some things while you're building others, and then maintain other things while you're building other things. And so it's kind of this this series of waves that you're doing with different types of training intensities, but also types of training. So building muscular strength, muscular endurance, power, aerobic threshold, anaerobic threshold, like capacity, anaerobic power, like all of these different things that we need. But of course, we can't do that all at once.
And I know I'm not the only coach or the only person on here that has, a bookshelf full of, I have some of my university textbooks for my kinesiology degree. I have strength and conditioning books. I've even read this one because I've got highlights in it. And it's fun to go through some of these things and revisit some of them as questions have come up from people, or if I'm writing a program for a certain person, and I'm like, ooh, I've got to do some research on that. So I'm not just relying on internet sources. It's like, these are scientific papers and scientific journals that I've collected over the years, and going, okay, what's the latest research? And luckily I still have access to a university library database for journals too. Not that I can understand them right now with my head, but in the past when I was writing programs. So there's lots of resources out there. And I just got a message here that the larrykane.ca website is still live. So if you go through his blog, it's an interesting read as it is, in terms of the stuff that he's talked about on there in the past as well.
Okay. I just want to say there's questions coming in the chat, and I'm not ignoring you guys. I'm taking note of them, and we will put them, we will be fitting those in at the end. So don't worry, I am watching what's being asked in there. Okay, next question. How can I maximize my time during the off season to best support my paddling during June, July, and August for the major races, when we have a regular schedule again?
I think we've covered this. Anything to add, Sherry, that I don't think we've talked
I don't
about
think
yet?
so. Yeah, the periodized program and having balance in your program is important. For some of us, we need to remember to have more rest and always have a rest day in your cycle. And well, for me too, it's like managing emotional issues as well. So um, don't stress over it. You're training because it's fun and you want to, right? So if it's something that's causing you a lot of stress about doing this or not doing that, um, try to sit back and relax and think about it, and then get back at it.
All right, I do have something to add to this. What you were saying, just if it's not fun, if you find yourself like feeling like you have to train, go do something else. Like you don't have to be on the water if you have access to water right now. Sorry, Val, I know you don't have the choice right now, but some people do. Is like it's being on the water all the time is not everything. It's not what makes a great paddler. Yes, you want to have, a certain amount of paddling, but for those that are, ice locked in the winter kind of thing, or those that just need that break after the end of a long season of being on the water and forcing yourself to do something, is you can base build by hiking, by cross country skiing, by walking hills, walking your dogs, walking someone else's dogs in my case. There's lots of things that you can do to get out there and move differently, so that it makes your body more injury resistant. So you're not always moving the same way all the time. There's so much benefit to having variety, to having that cross training within your repertoire kind of thing. For me, it's like paddle when it's nice, and focus on recovery. Getting another workout in isn't necessarily necessary. Have a bath and watch a show on Netflix. Like go visit on Zoom with a friend and have a glass of wine. Like do things for your mental health, but you can also do things that develop systems of routines for when time is crunched for you. Well, if you practice those systems of routines, like, packing your lunch and your breakfast for the day before, preparing those things, getting used to going to sleep at a certain time at night, getting those nighttime routines, or getting into meditation to help you de-stress from your day so you don't bite your significant other's head off. These are things that you can learn to manage now and start getting these systems in place so that when you do have the time and the ability to get back on the water and ramp things up a bit, things in the rest of your life, you've gotten down to like, okay, I've got that down pat, I can move on, I can go forward. And I keep getting these messages saying that one of these beautiful cross-training activities is pickleball. So in an email to the national team that I put out when we found out that COVID was canceled, I gave a listing of, cross-country skiing, hiking, snowshoeing, all these kinds of, I put pickleball in there. And one of my good friends has never heard of pickleball. So I get a text message about once every couple of weeks that randomly just says something about pickleball. And she still doesn't know what it is. And she's laughing in the chat right now. But the key is to go out and do different things, move differently. It's going to make your body more well-rounded. And it also helps to get yourself out of that competitive spirit sometimes. Put yourself in that newbie place doing something else. And yeah, learning to check that ego at the door for some of us that don't have racket eye coordination and some things. And as my training partner says, she's like, right now, she's like, well, doing this, I can be ahead of you. And this is my time to be ahead of you, because she's better at than me at some things. But on the water, it's a different story. But yeah, get out and move for your mental health.
I may touch on that again. So I never would have said just like relax when I was training for sprint kayaking, because I was very serious about it. But it depends on where you are in your training. So yeah, if you do have a big goal that you're working towards and it's really important to you, I wouldn't say lay back. But yeah, for most of us, and definitely me included, we're adults and we're doing this for competitive recreation. So in this way, then we're playing it for the long game, right? I'm in my 40s and I want to be doing this until hopefully 80s and beyond. So why would I worry about one workout, right? Yes, habits develop, and we do want to have those excellent routines. And I totally agree with what Leanne's saying about having routines and patterns in your life to help with those training behaviors. If you love paddling and you want to paddle and it feels good, you want to feel good in the next season, then have these routines and become a better and better paddler. But if you just love paddling, then you may have a different approach and you may not worry about it as much in the off season. It just really does depend on goals.
Okay, I have some questions for some of the people in the country that don't have access to water in the wintertime. I'm going to combine two of them. I don't have access to open water or an erg in the off season. What should I do so I don't lose all my gains from the summertime? The next question after that is, I've been doing HIIT training 4 times a week, running 3 times a week, and weight 3 times a week. Is this good enough for off season for a non-coast paddler? So maybe some help with how some of the non-coastal paddlers can get their training on in the wintertime.
Okay, that's a lot in one question, but first of all, taking on the first question about what do I like? I don't have access to water. Should I worry? Okay, when I was a sprint kayaker out here, we always, like, the people out east always kicked our butts because they would train without water access for so many months, and they would get so physically strong and have such great endurance from all the swimming and running that they were doing, that they were incredibly fit. And then of course, yes, they would do their spring training and summer training and take that fitness and transfer it to the water. But they were incredibly fit and excellent paddlers. So I don't think it's necessarily it's not bad that you don't have time on the water in the winter time. It's a time to focus on other types of training, and you can come out in the, maybe not right at the spring, but later spring and later at the end of the competitive season, you can come out just as strong, or if not stronger than us paddlers out here in BC. And the second question, that's a really challenging question to answer. 4 HIIT training, 3 running, 3 strength and weight training sessions. I don't really know what you're doing for each of those. Like, what are you doing for your running? What are you doing in the gym? HIIT training 4 times a week, that sounds like a lot, like too much to me, because that's would that be anaerobic capacity kind of training? Basically, sometimes HIIT training is way too intense, and what are you actually training for that? What muscles are you using? Are you doing like all like squats or what? Like, it depends on what you're doing for HIIT training. It's really trendy right now, but is it really a good training for paddlers? I don't know what you're doing in that training. So it yeah, you have to watch out for that. That's again why having a coach or a strength and conditioning expert who can help with periodization, they can help you, because in a given week of training, sure, you could have 4 or 5 endurance workouts and 3 strength training sessions and a bunch of other things too, but it's just how you balance it out, and making sure that they all fit together and don't interfere with one another, and that you have appropriate rest in between your workouts, within your workouts, and having days of rest, at least one full day of rest.
Yeah, completely agree. Unless we looked at what your actual breakdown of those workouts were, it's really hard to give it. But my one question would be, how often do you get sick? How often are you battling injuries? Are you always tired? Like, there's so many other variables that come into it as well, that unless we had more individual information, it's really hard to say what's good enough.
Okay. Here's another question that might apply a little bit more to the east than the west, or maybe to the west as well. I have a paddle erg, but no open water from November to March. That sounds like the east. Any advice for training on the erg?
Go ahead, Leanne.
Oh, the erg.
Come on, I love the erg.
So there's a love-hate relationship with the erg. And I have some people that I've worked with that love it. I have one. It's downstairs. It's been in my house for 10 years. It's still on the original bungee, which tells you how much I've used it, kind of thing. So the ergs are good for a few things. So the ergs are good if you put down the screen and don't pay attention to the display, and you have mirrors around and you're visualizing proper on-water technique. But because of that cord on the bottom of the paddle part of the erg, and the way it whips your arm back, and then how long it takes for it to get tension on it, the feeling is not the same as on water. So my problem with the erg is that if you spend too much time on it, you're going to develop bad technical habits. The good thing about the erg from a coaching standpoint is there's lots that I can do with people on the erg to develop good technique habits, but I'm not going to have them sit on there for hours on end, because you always fall into what is comfortable. And what is comfortable on an erg is not what's effective on the water, kind of thing. And so if you're actually looking at the display, and those of you that have ever done the dragon boat testing before they put in the requirements that you couldn't pull past a certain part of the seat, you can cheat an erg. So if you're that type A person that has your ego is tied to your numbers, an erg, yeah. If you're doing erg sessions with a coach, and I know there's a paddle gym in Ontario at Paddle Sport Performance that offers, or depending on COVID, but offers sessions where you have someone that can come around and help you get you back on track with that technical aspect, then yeah, there's lots you can do. But it's really tough to do erg workouts while thinking about technique unless you have a high level of skill and body awareness, or someone there to help keep you on track. So yeah, ergs are nice when you feel like you want to paddle, but I'm going to get a lot of backlash for this, but that's okay. I don't put a lot of, I don't recommend them to a lot of people. I feel you're better off to go out cross-country skiing. Get on an erg maybe once a week if you want to maintain that feeling and just of pulling, but it's not going to, unless you're doing specific drills to help your technique. And there are specific drills we can do on an erg. It's really hard to, I don't see the crossover. You're better off, as Sherry said, like with those East paddlers, going out and building their strength and the fitness, cross-country skiing, swimming, running, those kind of things. You're going to get more bang for your buck than trying to spend endless hours a day on an erg, in my opinion. And I'm not saying I'm the be all end all. There's going to be lots of opinions on that, and people are going to be against me, and that's okay.
Yeah, I do have some thoughts about it. I've been thinking about it more this year, of course, because of COVID. I don't have a paddling erg myself. I have a rowing machine, and I also have other things like this stick with bungee on it, or just bungees. So I think so. This is really conflicting what Leanne said. I think we're smart, and I think our bodies are smart too. And when I get in a dragon boat, I do dragon boat technique. When I get in an outrigger, I do outrigger technique, and I know the difference. And so I don't think that if you do an erg technique, it means you're going to have a problem with your paddling technique when you get in the boat, because it does feel totally different, right? The resistance is way different, and then it's at a different time. You can't get the right catch. You can't put your body on your weight on the paddle when you're using an erg. So it's a completely different feeling. So I don't think that you're going to mess up your technique with it. You'll just paddle differently. Something, of course, to watch out for is injuries. You need to make sure that you're stabilizing the core first, having connection, and not doing weird things with your top arm. But safely, there are benefits to it, and some of the benefits are psychological. So yeah, and aerobic and muscle endurance. So you can still get some gains in just basic fitness, like in different fitness categories. And psychologically, it can be nice to kind of get some of those feelings if you're not able to get those feelings if you're not able to get on the water. And I actually do have some paddling simulation classes that I run. These are just 30-minute add-on classes that I have, but it's fun. And some people have used paddling, like paddling machines, but most people bring they have their own invented things, like cut off paddles and bungees attached to different things, or just a band like that you loop and hold on your foot. So that, of course, if you just have a band that's attached to your foot and you're pulling, it's just like one arm rows, but you're still getting that muscle endurance. And in our setting, it's camaraderie as well. We're in a group, we're having fun, we're being fit, and it's helping us stay motivated and enthused about paddling. So we have a good time. And yeah, I'm going to be doing classes for a whole dragon boat team in March and April. Because of COVID, they can't get on the water. So we're going to be having team paddling simulation classes. So I think there are benefits to it.
That's cool. Yeah, that social side of things is huge. Getting people together to do that kind of thing. Oh, that's awesome that you're doing that, Sherry. Fantastic. And like I said, I know there's people that disagree with me on that, but yeah, exactly. The reasons you said, Sherry, totally makes sense. Like I agree on that kind of stuff. I'm just, for people that don't have that awareness, then that's where I get concerned of kind of thing. But you're right. If you've got the experience where you're like, okay, it feels different in a dragon boat, it feels different in an outrigger, I can adapt, I feel different when I'm on an erg, I see that it's different. Yeah, by all means. But it's for those people that can't tell the difference. Yeah, that's where, those are the people that I'm concerned about. But I know most of my Edmonton friends that love their ergs, they know the difference.
Okay, I want to move on to some more strength training related questions. How do I know which weight resistance to use for a given exercise?
Yeah, so this is a great question, and it depends on there are different ways of doing it. So my favorite way, rather than doing testing, because testing can be challenging, like 1 repetition max testing, you can't do that for all exercises anyways. It's not practical. So what you can do is just do a trial and error method. So try an exercise, see first if you can do the movement properly, get the movement down, have good technique without weight or with a very, very light weight. Then gradually move the weight up so you can do the repetitions that you are desiring. So say we're doing.
Have these been here a while?
So say we're doing 10 to 12 repetitions, then we would want to.
Have those been there a while? Are they probably mostly dry?
Are you able to mute? Beth, can you mute, please? Thanks. So then you'd be aiming to do the 12, sure, but if you have the heavier weight, then you can do the 10 repetitions. It's a range for a reason. So if you have a weight that you're able to do 12 repetitions, then think, okay, are these last 2 repetitions feeling challenging for me? If you can do 12 repetitions easily, then the weight is too light. If you can't do 12 repetitions, or if you can't even do 10 repetitions with good technique, then the weight is too heavy. So the goal is to do 12 repetitions with the last 2 repetitions feeling challenging on the last set. Or if you can do 10 repetitions and it feels challenging and you're working up to doing 12, then that's good too, because it's a range. Of course, that's kind of a general strength range. If you're doing more heavier strength, you might want to do 6 to 8 reps. That's not a factor here, but it's just making sure those last couple of reps feel challenging. And then when they're not challenging anymore, then start using heavier resistance or modify the exercise to be one of the more challenging modifications.
Okay. I'm going to follow this question with one of the questions from the chat. Sometimes I get pretty sore after strength training. How sore is too sore? And coming from the chat, what do you recommend to improve lactic tolerance?
Okay, to improve lactic tolerance, I was talking about those muscle endurance workouts where we would do like 2 minutes of one exercise. I wouldn't do this with every exercise. So this is a little bit, you would want the help of a coach to figure out which exercises are safe to do these and which aren't. But those exercises that you feel the burn for, that's basically it. If you feel the burn while you're doing the exercise, then you know you're working on that lactic acid tolerance. So muscle endurance exercises are good for that. And too sore so being sore up to 3 days after your effort is okay. It's fine. If you're feeling so sore that, if you've done one arm rows and you're so sore that you can't straighten your arms anymore, then that's too sore. Or if it's interfering with your daily life. So some might disagree and say, okay, it's okay if it's interfering with your daily life, but I think that if it's interfering with your daily life, then it's too much. If you can't like walk up the stairs, or hurts your core when you spit after you brush your teeth, those sorts of things, then you have gone a little too far. And so it's better to think about that for next time. Plus, we're training several times a week, right? So if you're training and you're really, really sore for the next workout, it's going to make that workout less effective generally.
You mean when we do our first, leg day after not doing strength training for 6 months, it's okay to not be able to walk down the stairs for a couple days or sit on the toilet very easily?
No, that's not okay. You work too hard. You should ease into it. How much weight were you using?
You mean
Body
check the ego at the door? What?
Yes, leave your ego at the door. Definitely. Egos cause injuries.
Not try and lift what we ended off last strength training season with? Don't start off with that?
No way.
Okay, so on that then, when should I work on building a base strength versus building power or muscle endurance?
Base strength. So this again is up for some people may disagree. Base strength is off-season training. So if you are wanting to work on general strength, then I would work on that. So after your biggest race, if you're in a non-COVID environment where you have races. So for a lot of us, that would be in September through to the springtime or early spring, working on your base strength training. So that's just general strength, like 8 to 10 reps or something in that range. You can modify that a bit, and working on getting, those external shoulder rotators, external shoulder, the rotator cuff strong, and all of those different things. And then in the springtime is when you would start to specialize more and do periodization cycles that focus more on muscle endurance or power. And you can sprinkle that in a little bit beforehand just to get the body ready for it. But you'd ease into that into the spring. And then in the summertime, when you're paddling as much as you can, then you'll just be maintaining all of those different strengths.
Okay, go ahead, Leanne. No?
Oh, I was just going to say, like what Sherry just described is an example of the periodization of a strength phase of a program kind of thing. So again, it's like look into getting a coach, make that investment yourself, work with a trainer, because they can help tell you kind of where those things fit in with your on water or off water conditioning work as well.
And a typical personal trainer might not know how to periodize for paddling.
Good point.
Okay, this one, it's not so much weight training, but this is an interesting question out of the chat that I think a few of us might want to know this one. What is the baseline test that one can conduct to understand your maximum sustainable output for 1 hour? For example, in cycling, there's an FTP test that's done in 20 minutes. Just curious, is there a paddling equivalent?
Looks like Leanne wants to say something.
I have this written somewhere. I just can't remember which notebook it's in. Oh, this question I didn't get ahead of time, so I didn't have my notes ready. There is, let me find it. And if I can't find it, I will post it in the, wherever we put up the link for the recording of this, I will put up what I find. Because I know I made notes on this because I did a webinar not too long ago and I was like, oh, this fits. So
Great.
I don't have it off the top of my head, but I know I can find it.
Okay, good. So I want to move to the next question then, because we're going to be running out of time real quick. What do you think of doing circuit training year round for your strength training?
I think this is something that's common, but it's not periodized. So it's not the best use of your time for strength and conditioning training. And it's not the best for paddlers. So things like strength and condition, so circuit training, if that's the only way you're getting motivated to do strength training, then keep doing it. But if you're more serious about your performance goals, then it's not the ideal way to train. And also having that same kind of training time year after year, or sorry, season after season in the same year, that's another way that you're more prone to have injuries if you're not having that variability in your loads and your intensity and your exercises.
Okay. How fast should we lift a weight? Should we match the speed we move the weight to the boat speed we expect at racing? I think they might mean the speed you're going to move your arms when you're racing.
Yeah, this is an interesting topic, and it's one that isn't really talked about very much. But so it depends on, we want to build strength, and we can't build strength or like maximum or near maximum strength or even general strength by lifting a weight really quickly, because the weight is too heavy to lift quickly. So when we're trying to do reps of 6 to 8 with a weight that's 80% of our maximum, then we can't lift as quickly. So then if you after you build that general strength as a foundation, then you can move on to power, which is force with speed. So that would be quicker with quite a bit of force, or muscle endurance, which is a lot of repetitions with a lesser force and maybe more similar in speed to the paddling stroke, or speed strength, which is quickly doing a number of repetitions, which is kind of a mix of power and muscle endurance, right? So then when you're doing that, that would be more similar in the speed of a stroke. So it's all about that periodization. When you're going into the summer or spring or summer, then you can match that boat speed with your strength training movements as better than you can when you're doing the general strengthening with the heavier weight.
Okay, I'm going to go to another question in the chat because I think it's an interesting one for some people that are racing in places like Hawaii and stuff like that. Any training techniques that can help prevent heat exhaustion?
Great question. This was a big question that I had back when I was going to Tahiti for the first time. I had been paddling in Hawaii for a few years, but going to Tahiti and getting ready for that in 2017, the biggest thing that you could do is, one, do your best to get there early. Like if this is a destination in terms of things, get there early to acclimatize to the heat. If it's a thing where it's like here in the Okanagan summers, it gets kind of warm kind of thing, where it's not an acclimatization thing, but it's your home. A lot has to do with the clothing you wear. Again, full disclosure, I am sponsored by this company, but finding a piece of clothing that I like to have clothing on versus having bare skin. Because I find that it helps pull that moisture away from me, but also by getting it wet to start, it helps keep me cool. So it also keeps the UV rays off my direct skin. So like Vycobi makes their V-Ocean gear, which like when it might be super, super hot out, but when that material gets wet, it actually feels cool, even if you're in sweltering, hot, humid Tahiti weather. So there's I think Excel has a fabric that does that as well. But finding a piece of clothing that will protect you from the UV, wick that sweat away, but when you get wet, it actually feels cool, and that definitely helps. Hydration is a whole nother conversation in terms of paddling, making sure that you have the right level of hydration. And again, in my notes from another seminar I did recently, just by taking in water or just by taking in a sports drink when you're out there doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be absorbed by you. So the term something like osmolarity, but it's like if the osmolarity of whatever you're drinking is different than that of your stomach, it can actually pull water out of your system to dehydrate you faster. Again, I have notes on this somewhere, but I can't pull it out of my brain at the moment because it's still a new concept for me. So doing some research into hydration, looking at what you're wearing, and again, level of effort is going to play into it quite a bit. What can you do to keep yourself cool? I know there's some people that have actually MacGyver devices that went inside their PFD that cycled cold water from a pack that they had, an insulated pack in their back, cycled cold water around their body kind of thing. So that was a MacGyver solution to help keep their core temperature down. That's all I have in my head at the moment. It's a tough one, but the hydration is a big piece on that.
This
And
isn't
direct sun.
this isn't for training specifically, but when I was at a race in Hawaii, the owners of the Kealoha company, I don't remember their names, but they came up to us and told us to get ice and put it in baggies and then have it with you in the boat. And if someone gets really hot, then just toss them an ice pack and then they put it under their hatch. So yeah, you do lose a few strokes though, but it was good for kind of emergency hot weather and an emergency thing.
That would be Dave and Meg Chun.
Thank you.
Okay, we're really running out of time, and I know we're going to have to post the answers to some of the questions that we have, but I just want to ask one more. So I'm going to ask one more, so you're only allowed to answer one piece of equipment. What training equipment do you recommend is worth investing in, like stroke coach or heart rate monitors, that sort of thing? So you each get to pick one, your favorite one, because we're running out of time, sadly.
I'll pass on this one. I'm not a fan of those for my own personal training.
If you would have asked me a few months ago, I would have said heart rate monitor. And that's more geared to the aerobic, anaerobic side of conditioning side of things. But I think, and oh, Derek, you didn't mention this publicly. This is private. But in the past, because I've been working on my concussion stuff, I've been doing a lot of breathing workshops and meditation workshops. And really, for working on those lower zone, easy training things, nasal breathing is just as good as a heart rate monitor to find where those zones start to separate, kind of thing. So it's like if I'm out doing a hike or a jog or a paddle, if I get to the point where I can no longer comfortably breathe through my nose, I'm going beyond that, my base training zone kind of thing. So for more level things, I still love my heart rate monitor for my situation. I don't know. That's a tough one.
Okay.
Or
Okay.
GoPro for technique, right? That's a good one.
Oh,
A
yeah.
GoPro to send your coach technique videos.
Okay, we're really running out of time, and there are some questions that didn't get answered. So we're going to post that somewhere, right? Eric, Leanne, Ron, we're going to, okay, so somewhere we'll finish answering to make sure that no question is not unanswered in this. So can I pass this over to Ron now? And I want to thank Leanne and Sherry so much for all that info. And
I'm happy to stay on and answer more questions if that's desired.
You don't mind staying on a little bit? Okay.
No, not at
I'll
all.
hang out too if people want to, but because we said 90 minutes, we'll do the formal wrap up. And those that want to go can. Those that want to hang out, by all means, paddling, talking, me, anytime. Yeah.
Super.
Okay. Thanks, Val. Thanks very much, Sherry and Leanne, for participating in the session. Really useful for a lot of people. Thanks, Eric, for moderating as well. So just a reminder that we've got another video session in 2 weeks. It's a town hall. The format of the series is that each month we've got one town hall and one coaches corner. So the next town hall is up in 2 weeks. And Leanne, do we know what the topic of that is yet?
Eric?
We're announcing that at the end of next week, but it is going to be focused around the sort of reality of OC1 training for the coming season. So it's going to be, my sense is that it's going to be focused on how to make OC1s more approachable for a broader spectrum of paddlers.
Okay, that's great, especially since a lot of the training and paddling through, at least to the summer is probably going to be in OC1 or small boats of some kind. Okay, and also a reminder that we've got the CORA virtual winter series race. And so, there was a mention of ergs today, so you can participate anywhere in the country. You can register a time based on your erg time. There was one who did that from the past race, for which we had 50 registrants, so that was pretty good. The next one is hosted by Lotus Sports Club and Nanaimo Ocean Paddling Club. And all the proceeds, $20 registration fee for adults, $10 registration fee for juniors. At the end of the series, all those registration fees will be divided equally among the 7 host clubs, and that'll help those host clubs with their finances, given that activities are down and they haven't been able to host their small boats races and raise funds like they normally would. Okay, that virtual series number 2 is the race. What we're calling the race date is on the 20th. Registration will open up the Saturday before on the 13th. This time we're actually setting a deadline for registration just to help with the administration of results that come in. Results will need to be submitted by the Sunday after the race date, so that'll be the 21st at 5 p.m. Okay, so hope to see a lot of people get involved in that, especially
Ron,
as we
Philip
move
is
on.
asking if we have to be in Canada to participate in these races, in the virtual races. We can be from pretty much anywhere, right?
Yeah, I think so. You do have to be a CORA member to participate. So it depends whether you've signed up for that CORA membership. CORA membership is $30 for an annual membership, and so you might trade off on that to determine whether that's worth your while to do that or not. Okay, and since Leanne and Sherry said they'll continue on, I think we'll just continue on with questions from the chat room, or even if you raise your hand, I suppose we can actually do a online discussion if that works for people.
And I just wanted to mention, I put a link in there because it's I have 2 websites. One is kind of about me, and the one that I put in there is just if you're interested in registering for any of my online classes. So
yeah, I think Sherry, when we do post questions that weren't answered before the end, maybe we can put that link in with the questions wherever we're going to post this, so that people know where to find you.
Val, we will be posting after this. The virtual series committee meets early in the week. We'll be posting proceedings from this, so people will have access to the content in terms of video. And also some written content in terms of unanswered questions to which we respond after the fact.
Okay.
And I just want to say thanks again to everybody for coming, whether you're from Quebec, Ontario, Hawaii, California, Washington State, Oregon State. I've seen like Anna Matheson from Hawaii is here. She's a phenomenal coach down in Hawaii. So it's great to see so many different places and people here. And by all means, jump in if you have questions or opposing views or ideas. Like, this is all for us to connect, because my firm belief is that together we all get better. So the more viewpoints we can hear, the more stories we can hear. That's why CORA is doing these series, to help us connect. So thank you for everybody that tuned in from all over, and by all means, like, hang out with Sherry and I a little bit longer if you want. And yeah, nice to see everybody.
Okay, girls, I'm just going to wait a minute to see, because the questions that were asked before the end, I'd kind of like to include those in our post information in case people had to leave for whatever reason. So we'll just see if anybody staying in has an immediate question before I get into any of those. Okay, do you want me to continue with some of the questions that were in the list? Because we're going to have to answer them in writing later as well.
Yeah. ask any of them from anything, and then yeah, we'll write them up after, and at least we'll have the
Okay.
recording to refer back to when we write up.
Does it matter what order I do exercises in a strength workout?
Yeah, it does. There are a couple of ways to think about which exercises to use first. One of the ways is to think about safety. Well, the main way is to think about safety. So, and also what are our priorities. So we want to do the exercises that are multi-joint exercises first. So say you're doing a squat that uses the knees and the ankles and the hips. So that's a lot of joints. Or if you're doing pull-ups or bench press, those both use like shoulder and elbows. So those sorts of exercises would be before the ones like lateral raises, which just use the shoulder joint, a single joint exercise. So you'd put the multi-joint, then single joint. You'd also alternate things like upper body, lower body, or opposing muscle groups like chest and back. So opposing. So there's all those things to consider. And then you also want to consider that the core is needed for almost all exercises. So you want to keep the core fresh for as long as possible. So like when you're doing squats, you need the core. So you don't want to do a bunch of pal-off presses or sit-ups or planks or things like that beforehand, because then your core won't be ready to do the work it needs for the squats. That being said, you also want to think of the type of strength you're building first. So first of all, we would be doing a great warm-up, cardio warm-up, dynamic stretching. If you do rolling, you could fit it in there. Then you would be doing power moves. If that's a time of year you're working on power, because that uses, you need your nervous system to be ready for that, and you don't want to be too fatigued for it. Then you would be doing strengthening, followed by muscle endurance. So there's a lot to consider, and then static stretching afterwards. You do that in that day.
Okay, and if I do strength training in the off season, do I still need to do it in the summer when I'm paddling more? And if so, why?
So if you want to maintain the strength gains that you made during the off season, then it would be great to do strength training during the summer, and you don't need to do as much. So that's with the maintenance training principle, that you don't need to do as great a volume, so you don't have to train as many times per week or even for as long each training session, but you need to train as intensely. So if you want to continue to work on to maintain your strength, then maybe you do 2 sets of pull-ups or lat pulls and chest press, versus maybe you were doing 3 or 4 in the off season, but you still do them with just as much weight as you can do. And you may be working more on the muscle endurance side of things in the summer as well. So yeah, you can, but if you don't strength train, it's not the end of the world. It's a little bit higher risk of injury if you don't strength train in the summertime. So that's a good reason to keep it in. And then the next season, you might have a little bit of a harder time getting back up to where you were, but it's not the end of the world.
Yeah, a lot has to do with the recovery time between sessions. And again, making sure that if you are splitting them, so like 1 in the morning, 1 in the afternoon, or by a couple hours, to make sure that you're fueling properly for both workouts. A lot of people, especially women, I'm going to call us out here, we often think, especially those of us that are bigger, and I deal with body composition issues. So I always had it in my head about, well, if I train fasted, which means not eating beforehand, well, I'll probably lose more weight, kind of thing. Like I'm taking in less calories in a day so that I can lose weight. But you're going to sacrifice the quality of your training if you're not providing fuel for that training in the body. So there are times when fasted training can be beneficial for certain things, but again, it comes on what are you trying to work on at that point in time. But if you're starting to do multiple workouts in the same day, making sure that you've fueled beforehand, during, depending on the duration of the session, and especially afterwards, to properly refuel your body so that you can hit that next workout with the intensity that is called for in the program, so that you're not just half-assing it.
Okay, you kind of semi-answered the next 2 questions, so I'm just going to move on to how do you recommend transferring gym strength to on the water paddling strength?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I'm not sure how to answer that because but when we do have that general strength and power and muscle endurance, it transfers because with stronger lats and rhomboids um, and deltoids and all of the core, all of these muscles, we can exert more force on the blade. So when you're doing your paddling training, you can exert more force every single stroke, and that means the boat's going to move faster. And so when you work on power training, you can exert more force quickly. So that means you can accelerate the boat better for each stroke that you're doing. That is a lot of strokes. But when you're working on muscle endurance, it means you can pull a lot of force for many strokes in a row. So that transfers. So it's not really about what exercise, how do I change my strength training to make it more transferable to paddling, other than doing that periodization that I was already talking about, because then that will allow you to have all the different types of strength that will allow for optimal paddling performance.
And often in a paddling periodized program, we'll often start with like general body preparation kind of thing, where it's like a general strength program. Whereas when we get closer to the season, we start doing some more paddling specific movements, but we don't focus on those because we want to keep that general all around strength. Because when you think about in the boat, your connection, so the force on the blade, it has to go through the paddle, which then has to go through your arms, through your shoulders, through your core, to your ass and your feet, which is the connection to the boat, to then move through the body or move through the boat through the water. So if there is a segment from that blade on that paddle that force has to travel through down to the boat, if there's something there that is, I don't know, jiggly, flimsy, flobby, flappy, whatever, you're going to lose that force. So you want to have that solid connection from that force that you can generate on the blade, it being able to transfer solidly to not lose very much all the way through the ass and your feet to be able to move that boat forward. So that's where the strength is so important in paddling and doing some of that work off the water, because you can build strengths on the water. You can use bungees, you can use balls, you can do those kind of things. But you've also got to be really careful because it's a high risk of injury if you haven't done the foundational work of building like your shoulder stabilizers, external, internal rotators, rhomboids, all those things. If you haven't done that work beforehand, if you're just jumping in and going, oh, I'll just do my strength on the water, and you haven't done any background strength, the risk of injury is huge.
Yeah, that's unfortunate when there's a really excellent paddler and so enthusiastic, and they're just like amazing paddlers, but they don't do anything in the gym, and then they do a really hard training block and get injured because they have, well, I talk about like weakest links, right? Weaker links. Maybe, yeah, your lats and rhomboids are really strong, but you have this neglected shoulder injury, and your external rotators or whatever, your whatever muscle or ligament or whatever happens to be hasn't been tended to. So that's going to be where the force kind of leaks out, as Leanne was talking about with that connection. The force is going to, yeah, be leaking out there, and then that will cause injury. I don't know if that made sense, but yeah, that also reminds me, Kathy made a little note in the chat, and it reminds me, hope you don't mind me saying this, Kathy, but it reminds me of something that you said in one of the strength classes, that you gained body awareness. So she was mentioning how she was thinking about how her shoulder blades are moving, and we talk about it in the strength class, and then she moved that into the paddling session and realized, oh, okay, like I know how to move my shoulder blade now, and I know when to move it and when not to move it. Those weren't her exact words, sorry, Kathy, but just the increased body awareness she said helped with paddling, and I thought that was really cool to hear, because yeah, I don't always think of things in that way, and it was nice to hear.
So if I'm gonna call out another person in terms of a cue, and that they've been learning in the gym, and I've been trying to forever to try and keep those shoulder blades down instead of letting them wing out, and like keeping your shoulders down, giving yourself a neck. And I refer to this all the time on the water as well. And so I used a cue the other day, and they're like, that's the one. and they're saying like, can you say this? And it was, if you've watched Lucifer on Netflix, then you recognize this. And I was like, you want to be like Lucifer, like think about having when his wings are out versus when his wings are in, kind of thing. So with his wings in, the shoulder blades are tucked down and back when the wings are out. So it was just like, be the morning star became the cue. So like that's one of the benefits of working with a coach, is finding what cue works for you. Because I don't know how many times I've tried, hundreds of times I've tried to say this in how many different contexts, but finally that one thing clicked. He's like, oh, now I can visualize the wings, you know, tucking the wings in. I was like, oh, finally. But yeah,
Okay,
body awareness. That was the connection that I was trying to make.
I just want to mention Kathy is giving a beautiful endorsement to Sherry and really enjoys her classes. So you guys might want to check those out. And there's a question about if we're going to be doing one of these on nutrition, and it'll certainly be on the list for us to talk about. I've got one final question for you guys. How do you stay inclusive when heading out for a paddle during COVID? For clubs, for example, what are you doing to ensure that people don't feel left out?
This is so hard because of the restrictions. It's hopefully clubs are organizing in a way that is safe for everyone, that meets the provincial guidelines or have the ability to do that, or guidelines wherever you are in the world kind of thing, and has different times set up. It's difficult when there's so many people, and this is one of the things that we struggle with in Kelowna, is that there's so many different people on different schedules with different goals. And so it's hard to coordinate people to go out, and sometimes it's hard to remember who all has these similar goals. So like, if anyone has a solution to this, I'd love to hear. Like, we still got 30 people on the call. It'd be great to hear from other people of what are they doing to help get people out that want to be out, and trying not to leave others, you know, sitting on the bank that want to be out there. Because last thing we want to do is leave people on the shore that want to be paddling. Like, we want everybody paddling because we know how awesome it is. So is there anyone on, like, or Sherry, that has thoughts on this? By all means, unmute and give us some ideas.
Yeah, this has been a really hard one. I mean, meeting online for other activities has been helpful, but that doesn't help with paddling. And not everyone has their own boat, or even is near a club that has like boats that you can use. So that has been challenging. I know that some people have bought cheap kayaks and been able to go out as teams in less expensive boats and different boats. And I think that can really help with those feelings of camaraderie on the water, because that's a big reason why a lot of us paddle. Other ideas out there?
Scott, you have something to say?
Yeah, I kind of think this year is a big challenge for everybody, because those people that were in an OC6 and never tried an OC1 or an OC2, they were comfortable in a 6-man. They're almost kind of forced to go into an OC1 or an OC2 where they're hesitant. And as a coach, that's a big challenge to take somebody from their comfort zone to an OC1, and going from a competitive point to a beginner's point. There's a big balance there.
And we're going to talk about that in the next community town hall in 2 weeks on February 20th.
Yeah, that's right. Because I think it's bad, especially moving into the off season and during winter. Anybody who was typically a regular OC6 paddler and maybe only had gone out a few times every so often in an OC1 is going to be really kind of hesitant to go out in winter, when the risk of hullying and hypothermia is could put, if there are bigger waves or wind and weather conditions are worse, then that's a significant factor. So I think one other way that if somebody doesn't have the ability to get on the water in the off season, is maybe try getting a group together to do some kind of an online kind of workout session or group fitness session. I know that some dragon boat teams have done that, at least did that earlier on in COVID. I don't know if they've continued on, but that would get the camaraderie going within any particular paddling group, whether an OC6 crew or a dragon boat team or whatnot?
Yeah, it sounds like a lot of the groups that are doing things, it's like they have someone that'll take charge and
Yeah.
just say, hey, let's do this kind of
Mhm.
thing. And I think that's, hopefully we see more of that this year, if we're continuing to be, restricted in what we can do. Is just ultimately it takes somebody to kind of take charge and step up and go, I want this, so I can't be the only one that wants this, so I'm just gonna be that person. So like Sherry's done that with paddlers that she works with. There's a lot of dragon boats teams out east that I know are doing Zoom workouts, that kind of thing. But yeah, ultimately it takes that squeaky wheel to go, all right, let's do this.
Yeah.
Oh, this is Kevin here. I'm gonna just add on to what Ron and Leanne were saying. My team, Juice, we do like Zoom workouts. We have a strength coach and 3 coaches that coach on water. So we have like Zoom workouts 2 or 3 times a week, where most of the team joins for attendance or just to have fun or like come in and stay fit. And our strength coach writes those workouts like body weight or with resistance bands, so everyone can do them. And it's kind of just a way of staying in shape or just meeting people while we're isolated. I also write like on water workouts, so people that have access to OC1s can still do like their workouts if they want. We still have whole time trials every like 2 months so that people can see where they're at and just try and kind of stay in shape. Although water time right now is pretty hard, we also do like group activities like snowboarding where we can still physically distance, or hiking or whatever, right? Just to kind of stay together.
Your
That's
team's got
awesome,
it.
Kevin.
That's awesome. Yeah. Some teams aren't as techy and not everyone wants to go online, but it sounds like your team is all for it. That's wonderful.
That's awesome to hear, Kevin.
Yeah, Juice is a really socially knit group, which is actually really great to see. Yeah.
Here in Edmonton, we have no access to club facilities or boats. The water's frozen anyway right now. So since March of last year, what I've done is, because I'm not running a Zoom workout, but I do send video workouts to the team 3 times a week. But for being inclusive, one of the criteria of these is that they have to be a no equipment workout so that everybody can do them. And I know that there are only a few people that actually do them, but I continue to send them to everybody so that I haven't cut them off communication-wise with the team. So they see that email 3 times a week. And then I've combined 2 teams to go for walks twice a week, and then we do an outdoor stand-up boot camp once a week. And the same thing, the same people come out every time, but I continue to send the invitation to everybody every single time, because I don't know what they're going through. I don't know why they're not there, but I know many, many times if you continue to invite somebody, they may come, after the 100th invite or whatever. So,
right.
But for the challenge for me, myself, is I have to make sure I continue that. So it started in the middle of March last year. So we're at almost 11 months of doing it, and it's been consistent throughout the whole thing. So that's my way to make sure that I'm in touch with everybody, whether I get a reply back or not. Anyway, and then when I'm doing the walks, we have people who walk at different paces. So I try to walk with somebody different every time so that, I'm, what do they call that? I'm touching every person at some point.
Mhm.
In a COVID-friendly manner.
Yeah.
You're making that connection. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
it.
That's
Yeah.
great.
You're
that's good. That's great.
interacting with that person.
And the same thing for those who can get on the water, if you're in sort of a small group, and someone's lagging behind, you know, you have the people up front circle back, right? And then keep that person included in the group, right? That's really important so that that person doesn't feel left out and say, oh, this is an awful experience. I'm never coming out again because I'm always in the back, right?
So Ron, building on that, how do we make sure people get out on the water and know when others are going out on the water in the first place?
That's actually tough. Can Kathy Moore from False Creek maybe chime in on this? Because I know that she was trying to get some kind of a system going at False Creek, because we've got the club boats and a reservation system. But then the thing is that, you know, I think when people reserve, they don't necessarily know who else is reserving at the same time. So they can't necessarily get a group reservation. So Kathy, are you still on?
Hi everyone, it's Jonathan here.
Oh yeah, I'm still here. I was trying to connect people, particularly people who had were beginner OC1 paddlers, so they weren't part of a group. They weren't part of a dragon boat team or an OC6 crew, and they'd learn how to paddle OC1, and then, as Ron said, you have to book, you reserve your times, and it's tough to organize it, and they wouldn't have anybody to paddle with. So we didn't really get that far, but we were trying to set up a WhatsApp paddle buddies group, so you could do, you know, and I think we're going to try and get that going, so you can say, you know, I'm going out, is there anybody who can buddy up with me and come out and paddle with me? And we've tried to encourage some of our more experienced paddlers too to put themselves out there as paddle buddies, because we found that there's some really athletic people that have a lot of potential, and we don't want to lose them as paddlers just because they took up the sport and they couldn't find anybody to paddle with. So it's been a tough one trying to connect with those people. But for existing groups, what I found for my mixed distance, for instance, it's the WhatsApp group. It starts flashing when it gets windy out and come on, let's go paddle. And which has actually been great for me. I've been out actually with Ron and Hector a few times who pushed me beyond my comfort level. And I've learned a lot this summer. So that's been great. But for the new ones, that's been a challenge. How do they find people to paddle with? Yeah, especially right now too, we're at the club at False Creek Racing Canoe Club. We're only letting 2 people and go out at a time in a reserved time slot to try and keep that social distancing. If they meet up on the water with the next 2 who come out 15 minutes later, or someone in a private boat, we can't do anything about that. But we've really tried to not encourage grouping up on the water at the current time.
Yeah, just a note under the current British Columbia Via Sport guidelines, grouping for example, OC1 would be a maximum of 4 people, maintaining a 3-meter distance while on the water. So
yeah.
I just want to kind of chime into that. I use a system from Dragon Zone. They have a sign-up system where you have Google spreadsheets and you just kind of sign up on the spreadsheet. So anyone with membership can see that people have signed up. So if you look at the sheet for like next week, right, you know how many of your teammates are going out, you know when they're going out and how long they're signed up for. And usually that seemed to work because I think in the last couple of months, I've seen a lot of like my teammates on there, and it kind of acts as like a kind of like a catalyst to make other people go out more.
Yeah,
ultimately,
ours is,
ours
is visible as well now.
Oh, okay, that's good. Yeah.
It's false. Okay.
Yeah, I was just gonna say like this lockdown is gonna be, you know, or like this COVID thing is only gonna be temporary. It's not gonna like last forever. So it's kind of like an opportunity to kind of improve and develop ourselves while the races are not happening. So it's kind of like a long-term goal and working on like individual development. So we kind of see this as an opportunity versus like a negative thing. And kind of working towards like the end goal, which is going to be nationals in 1 year, 2 years, right? Or like club crew, right? So while people are not actually watching you doing races, you don't know how much you're improving, right? So it's kind of like a goal setting as well.
That's actually a really good. That's actually a really good point, you know, because like every year during race season, I practically can never make it to the gym because there's a race every weekend and you've got practices all the time. So like it's, if there's downtime from races, you actually can get to the gym, which I haven't done, but which you should be able to do. Yeah. So that's actually a really good point.
Yeah. And ultimately, like, there's gonna be people sitting on the couch and stuff, right? Because they don't know there's races and stuff, and it's COVID. So it's kind of like an opportunity for you as well to improve and kind of overtake the people that are kind of just sitting there, right? So it's kind of like a good thing if you're still on the water, still training.
Yeah.
I've actually, in my personal experience, as Ron knows, I haven't been doing outrigger that long. I came from being a breast cancer dragon boat paddler, which is not a very competitive, and our crew, as Sherry knows, wasn't particularly competitive. But I've grown from there. And this last year has been fantastic for me because there has been time, as Ron says, we're not going to races. I broke down and got a boat, and then I was challenged to, I kind of went from being the club boat Toyota Corolla driver to I bought a Cahelli. Now I'm driving a Ferrari, and she's thrown me a couple of times. But so I've challenged myself. I took surf ski lessons and then went back and thought, why did I think this boat was so tippy? And I want to take marathon so I've found for my own personal development this past year, without having to coach dragon boat and be OC6 races, I've had the time to take time trial clinics and take a course here and there, and it's actually been quite a good year for me. So from paddling, so I've learned a lot. I've learned a ton. So yeah, and then Sherry's gave me a program, and I've been with Sherry for strength and fitness and boot camp. So I'm probably in pretty good shape. Can't wait to get back in the OC6. So that was my personal experience over the past year. It's been pretty good.
And I don't think you're alone in that as well. Like people that have used this past year, and like that's why we wanted to talk about this COVID season training coming in this year coming up, is because if we look at it, like Kevin said, as the long game kind of thing, we can do that personal development. Because like you said, we're not running to races every week or every weekend kind of thing. You get that time to really focus on that periodization, to work through these things. Because even when you've got to think about when there are races every weekend, should you race every weekend? And again, that comes down to the goal side of things, of what is your end game? What are you trying to get to kind of thing? Because if you look at April Zilg's stuff, and she has this on her YouTube channel where she has 3 different videos about planning out your season, where you talk about your A races, your B races, and your C races, so that you can plan your training according to those different races. And like the C's ones are like, they're a workout. The B ones, you kind of want to do okay, but it's you integrate it into your training plan. And then the A's are like, these are the money races. These are the ones that are my top priority kind of thing. So, but here in BC, and especially on the coast there, where you had the Tuesday night race series there for a while, and you had the Thursday night wave chop or wave chaser, and then you had your weekend CORA races. I was like, when does anyone actually train kind of thing? When I'm looking at you folks out on the coast, it's like, it's just too much. But if you're a social paddler that loves the people and that kind of thing, if that's your goal, is that community, it's perfect. If you're looking to, if you see those as kind of like, it's just a hard 5K kind of thing, and it's just part of your program, that's where it fits that week, you've scheduled your program around that, again, it's manageable. But yeah, it's all about thinking that long game. And for me, just like you, Catherine, it's like last season was the best thing for me, where it took all pressure, performance pressure off of me. It's all like the pressure I put on myself is all in my head, but it took all that off me, and I got back to paddling like for fun and looking at scenery and talking to people and taking pictures and all this other stuff that's like, sometimes you put the blinders on when we're out there training, and you forget to go, oh my God, there's a reason why I'm out here. It's the listening to the water, the sound of the birds as they fly overhead, watching that bald eagle hunt this little duck as we go by, like all these little things that it's like, we're out there because we love the water, we love the nature, and just taking those blinders, the training blinders off, and going, oh yeah. And it's still beneficial because we're at that zone 1, we're building that base. So it is functional, it is going to pay off in the long run. And for me, this past year has been the whole ultimate reset. Like, it's horrible that it had to happen in this way, but like you, there's so much growth in my paddling.
And I think it's kind of like what Kevin said, it's the end game. And we get focused on, I've got this 5K race next weekend. 2 or 3 weeks from there, I've got this other 5K, I've got this other 10K. You get busy in that 1 year of all these little races. When you look at the Olympics, it's a 4-year stint in between competitions. So you get to build for those 4 years, whereas we're always trying to get that next weekend race in. So it's kind of been a good thing that things have been pulled back. You get to focus on training, cardio, everything like that. And I think once everybody gets back into racing, it's going to be a lot more competitive.
Totally agree. It's going to be fun to see kind of who's done the work and who hasn't, who's been out active and what they've been doing. It's, yeah, the stories that are going to come out afterwards. And even just hearing what different people are doing here, I had to turn the notifications off on my watch because people kept texting in with different things that are on the call. And I'm like, quit distracting me. But so many people are so excited. And some of those people that were struggling with that motivation, just by the last 2 weeks ago, our town hall we had, and just hearing what different people are doing now in terms of off-season training, it's helping with that motivation. Like, my heart is so full right now from hearing these people's comments in the chat, seeing people's faces here, and the messages that I've been getting on my phone, that people are liking this. This is helping with them with that motivation piece that they might have been lacking. So I'm super stoked. I don't know what that question that had to do with. I just had to say it.
I just want to chime in because a lot of this discussion can and should continue in our next town hall. So we'd love to have you all joining us so that you can share your thoughts on how people are managing through COVID, and this all came from the question of inclusivity. But just because we have Sherry and Leanne, our sort of, star coaches for the discussion tonight, I'm just wondering if anybody has any last questions for them specific to training, and maybe the other stuff we can direct towards our town hall in 2 weeks, because it will be sort of a similar subject for COVID training and stuff. So anybody have any last minute stuff they want to shout out to Leanne and Sherry, aside from all of the thank you, it was awesome. So we got a lot of those, which is great. But
I have a question for Sherry and Leanne. I'm having a hell of a time getting my heart rate up in my V1. And I'm wondering if it has to do with me not grabbing enough water. I know that my max heart rate is, like, in swimming, I can get it up to 156. But it's all I can do to get it up to 130 in the V1. What do you think is going on?
It could be that you're doing a lot of aerobic training and you're not trying to bump it up with other types of training and having other training blocks. I went to Comini's workshop just today, and she had some great ideas about kind of putting speed and anaerobic power work in different places in the season than might be traditional. Because a lot of distance paddlers, we get into the routine of just like kind of that cyclic paddling, and it is really hard to get your heart rate up if that's all you're doing. But if you have some training blocks where you get the speed up and you teach your body how to move faster and with more force, then you can then you're physically able to do those types of pieces that do bring your heart rate up higher. So I'm not sure what training you're doing now, but that could be relevant.
I've got Connie's training program.
Oh, okay. Well, never mind.
I'm gonna look at it from a different point of view, Jay, from the V1 side of things. Have you spent any time in the OC1, and is there a difference in your heart rate from OC1 to V1?
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So
How about
I can
putting a
crank it up in the
resistor?
OC1.
How about putting a resistor on the V1?
No, that's not what it has to do with. So you said in OC1 you can get it up?
Higher than I can in the V1.
Okay.
I agree with Leanne.
You don't know what I'm saying yet
I know what you're going to say.
about technique and steering. So often in the V1, because we have the added skill required of the control of the boat with our paddle, and because we often have to, like, depending on what style of steering you like to use, if you steer at the front, the middle, the back of the stroke, what steering strokes you use, the style of your steering, that might be all you're able to do in that boat until your steering skill gets better. So right now, your aerobic capacity, or like how high you can go and how hard you can go aerobically in the V1, is limited by the boat control ability. So it's working on that skill, and the more we work on the skill in terms of the steering and boat control, the higher you're going to be able to get up closer to what you can do in an OC1. So
I wondered if that was part of the problem. And so you've actually mentioned something that's pretty intriguing to me. Different styles of steering in the V1?
Yes.
I think I need to understand that.
When we can travel interprovincially, happy to hang out with you and show you some different styles. And I know Scott's got some opinions on the steering stuff of V1 as well, since he's been strictly V1 now for a few years. But yeah, there's definitely different styles of how to steer the V1, and I like to call it different levels as well. There's like the beginner level of like, okay, here's what you go, and then once you've got that down pat, then we can add this little minute detail, and then once you've got that down pat, we can add this and this and this. So they build on each other, but we've got to have that base level before we can add more. And so the V1 stuff is like a whole nother technical session, like, but I'd love to be able to do that one on water with people, because so much of it is visual and then playing with it and seeing what happens.
Yep.
But yeah, I could go on for hours about V1, and I'm sure Scott and I could play off V1 for even longer with this stuff.
Okay, we need a town hall on V1.
No, but going back to your original question, your heart rate, where you think if you're in an OC1, you can basically paddle 10, 12 strokes, 10, 12 strokes.
Right.
You can keep your heart rate up and push it. Whereas in a V1, you're either 1 or 2 or 3, 1, 5.
25.
So it's always.
Or 50 on one side.
142 and 3 and yeah.
That's where steering style comes into play too.
So back to the heart rate thing is, in the V1, you're more concentrated on keeping straight and not working on strength and speed.
So from a training perspective, if you have access to both boats, if you're one of our privileged people that have access to boat, if you're trying to do, again, depends on what the long game is, what is the ultimate goal. But if it's a strict kind of like, I'm working on just speed, aerobic threshold type stuff, do those workouts in the OC1. If you're trying to train that for like OC6 or OC1 training, while you work and bring the skill up on the V1. And then with the V1, it's like, okay, what is my limiting factor? And going, okay, well, there's some workouts, there's sometimes I just want to go hard. And right now that I'm limited with my concussion, I'm dying to go hard because I haven't been allowed to for a year and a half. But there's some times where it's like, there's some days when you just need to get that rage out, and you need a hard workout, and it just happens to be what's in your program that day, or you switch a day or two. And it's like, I'll just go in the OC1 because I know I can't get that in the V1. Just like on a great big downwind day, which one am I going to have more fun in?
Yeah.
And it's the harder you push a V1, the more it pushes back. Yeah. So it's one of those that it's more technical. So push hard on a V1, relax and be technical, or push hard on the OC and be more technical on the V1.
You got to treat the V1 with finesse
and respect.
I know about the respect part. I've had some experience, but thank you for that, Leanne and Scott. The takeaway for me is to work the finesse. Okay, so thank you. That's a start.
Good. Anybody else want to have a question?
Do I
And
get to
also
go eat the
Sean.
pizza that I could smell downstairs baking?
Mm.
Okay, everybody's being pretty quiet there, Leanne.
Thanks everyone for hanging out. Love the questions. Scott, thanks for chiming in. Catherine, Ron, Jonathan and Ali, you were going to jump in on something, but I don't know if it got covered by something else. Kevin jumped in.
It was a question about being inclusive of everybody. In Fort Langley, we've decided to have everybody in private boats register their session on the same calendar that the club boats are put on. So everybody can see everybody. And that's a very public Google calendar. I think I'm only talking to 4 people now, but you know, what the heck.
That's all right. Thanks.
And we still got 22.
Oh, well, there you are, 18. So a great session, guys. Thank you very much indeed.
Thanks for coming.
Thanks everybody
Thanks,
for coming. I
everybody.
hope you come back in a couple of weeks.
Thank you,
Sherry.
Leanne and Sherry.
Leanne.
Thank you for your time.
Anytime. Really enjoy talking about paddling, so I'm happy.
That was really good. Thanks,
Yeah,
everybody.
And Sherry, thank you so much for coming on. Absolutely love it. When we do the post, we'll make sure that your website gets up there as well. So if people have follow-up questions for you, they know who to come to. And looks like you had lots of fans on here today that were giving you testimonials in the chat too. So that's fantastic that that you're reaching out to so many people, because so often, as we all know, it just takes that leader to give people something to grasp onto. So you being that leader in the paddling community for so many is so beneficial in keeping so many people connected. So I love what you're doing. It's fantastic.
It's been a lot of fun. And yeah, it is fun for me too, just to be with all of the different groups and meet people from all over North America. Yeah, it's been really good.
Nice. And yeah,
And
I
thanks for
can't
having me. It's been, I
thank you
enjoyed
enough for coming. Excellent. All right. Nice to see everybody.
Okay.
And we'll see you on the flip side.
Oh, and Loria, if you're still there, I love what you were doing to be so inclusive. I didn't have the chance to say it before, but you were, it sounds like you really, like your athletes know that you care about them. So that is going to mean a lot coming out of COVID, because I think the paddling community, it means more than just paddling together, right? It's about like caring about each other and the community. So even if they don't come out to any of their sessions, they still know you care. So that's what's important.
Yeah.
Yes, I hear it all the time. They do. They really appreciate it. And I hear it from them all the time. But thank you for saying.
Yeah, you're one of the, again, another leader in the paddling community that like so many people are looking for people to step up and help people make those connections. And so again, we can't have enough people like you guys. And thank you so much for doing what you do for the paddling community itself.
And you too, Leanne. Thank you.
I just want people to paddle with.
Thank you and goodbye.
All right. I'm going to eat pizza.
Okay.
Right.
All right. Night, everybody.
Night.